Okay, my model's set for 45 minutes. And then it's been in the oven for 15 minutes at 250 degrees. And I'm going to spray this model sealer on it. Just a little bit all the way around. And don't forget to do the base. Now, actually, that model's hot, so I'm just touching it. If you have any buildup of spray on the model, this is just like wax, and you'll end up casting the model hardener. The model hardener in this case is called Durafluid. Let's zoom up a little bit on the model. And we can see that I don't have any. It's still a little bit warm. A lot of bit warm. And this is pretty hard. But if we drop it, we might hit some chips. I mean, really critical points here of the refractory model are the rest preparations to make sure that they've duplicated nicely. And obviously the abutment teeth. You can see my ledge here, very sharp. So I'm going to lay my wax pattern right on top of that ledge. I don't have to resurvey or anything. And if I look, ooh, it's a little hot. If I look on the right side, I've got a leather ledge here, and I'm going to lay that clasp underneath here. And it's going to be very close, if not spot on, to my red line, which was measured at 0.25 millimeters, undercut below my height of contour. And you can see here a nice sharp internal finishing line. This is, so underneath the denture, this will be the junction point between the bar and the acrylic flange. And then we're going to create an external finishing line in our wax up. So while this model is cooling off, I want to introduce you to some of the wax patterns we're going to use. And what you're going to need for this procedure obviously is an alcohol torch, a number 7 spatula or your favorite waxing tool. I'll keep the blue background, it's pretty. A number 7, a Bard Parker knife or surgical knife, and maybe a Zale carver. I think that's what you call this one, or something fine carving instrument. So these 3 things, and an alcohol torch, I think was all you need. Now I've created a ball of pattern wax here. What I need you to do is, like in Crown and Bridge, we're using inlay wax. You could use inlay wax, but I think it's a lot easier if we're using, and consistent for burnout, if we're using all the same wax. So you have a small sprue inside your wax kit here. I think you can take a small one. It's square, and you can roll it up, and this will be our reservoir for our wax up. Now, I can't stress this enough. Make sure everything's clean around your desk. Okay, we're waxing up. Any kind of dust or specks of acrylic or dirt's going to get on our wax up, and it's really going to seriously affect the quality of our wax up and the density of our castings. So I've created a ball of wax here with the wax pattern wax. Now, some companies are plastic patterns and some are more wax. This is all the same wax, all of them, other than the sprues might be a different color because of the composition. It's slightly different of the sprue wax. But nevertheless, it's very close. So make yourself a little small piece that you can keep clean somewhere, okay? You can even put it back in your box here if you wish, if there's room. So what you need first and foremost is the lingual bar. So I want to give you a second to locate the lingual bar. If you look at the cross section, it's tapered to the top end. It's not a square rectangular piece. It's kind of ovoid. If I was to draw a picture of it, the inferior border or the top will be sharp, and then it's a little bit teardrop at the bottom, tapered, and then straight flat at the back. Hopefully that drawing makes sense. So we want the tapered side at the top. That's going to be the inferior border of the lingual bar. And the flat side, obviously, this will be against the tissue. And by the time we trim it and electroplate it, will be, the model's still a little bit warm. But if I put wax on the warm model, you can see it's going to melt the wax. So Let's see if I can blow it. Just trying to cool off the model a little bit with some air. So you need the lingual bar. Now each company sells different types of lingual bars. I've already taken the liberty to pick the profile for you. I mean, there's different millimeter heights and widths and thicknesses, or heights and widths. Each company will make 5 or 6 different kind of lingual bars. I've already pre-selected the one here in the kit for you. Next, you will locate some grid-like retention, or a sheet of it. It comes in different, I have some of these odd shapes, but it does the same thing. Basically, it's mechanical retention for the acrylic. This will come in a sheet. I've just cut off a section for the presentation here. And this one here we'll be using for other projects as well. It's the same thing, just a preference. Still a little bit warm. We should let our model cool off. So we've got the mesh-like, grid-like. It comes in squares, it comes in circles, it comes in funky loops. Different manufacturers have different kinds. They have small circles. Here's a little bit left over with small circles. And here's one with large circles. And do I have any with grid-like? Let me have a peek. I may. Yeah, so we got large circles, small circles, the funky do circles. I've got some braided ones here, all for doing the same thing, but maybe used in slightly different situations. We're going to be using the circled ones you have. Whether they're small or large doesn't matter. But if you look at your grid-like of circle patterns, there's the pattern side. Excuse me, it comes like this with some tissue paper on it. The part on the tissue paper is the bottom side. If you flip it over, you can see it's very flat. If I hold it on an angle, like it's perfectly flat. We want the flat side down and the textured side up. The flat side down, the texture side up. So many people in the past have kind of turned it upside down. So I think we're ready to go here. And I'll stop the video, or anyone else can, and we'll wait for each step till everyone has caught up. Because we're just not going to go ahead and say, okay, we're done. We're going to stop at each stage. So I'm going to take the lingual bar, and if your pattern's cold, I can kind of manipulate it a bit, because I've already have my model beside me of what it's drawn like, okay? 3 to 5 millimeters below the height of contour. And I might take a little extra of my lingual bar, and I want it symmetrical, so I want the height of it to be in the center, and then come back down. I've got a little kink in it. If you do have a kink in it, make sure that's in the center. Remember, there's strength in angles, and straight bars, like some of bars people will make it look like the belt on your pants, you know, straight across. It does have a little dip here and a little up in the center, and then back down. Be careful not to nick or bend or scratch your pattern. You know, different companies, I think this is a ceramic tool, or you can get the eraser to move it around, you know, so you don't ruin the pattern. Once I'm satisfied with the location of my bar, and most people will go riding high by the bicuspids. Remember, maintain that distance from the lingual gingival margin, even a little bit more, all the way around. And once I'm satisfied with this location, I'll chop it off and seal it right here at the, I'm just going to put a little bit more of a dip on this side. So if I hold it this way, you can see it has a bit of a swoop up and a swoop down, trying to give it some strength. Now, we don't have to seal the bar down, because our model has some tack to it, and it will stick to the model perfectly. There. Try not to manhandle it too much. So I want everyone to go ahead and put the bar on first and then stop. Once we have the bar on, the next step would be the mesh retention. Now naturally it's going to go exactly where I've got the block out. Don't go past the block out. Go right to the block out. So you need a little bit of a, visual spatial guesstimation. Take a little bit more. We have many of this in the dispensary when we run out. We can supply, but you have more than enough. So as you can see, I've come just above the height of the bottom of the bar. Okay, don't go even with it. Just above the height of the bar. Flat side down. Serge your eyes just past the crest of the ridge. Serge your eyes. Cut the wax, a little bit of an angle at the back, and then right along the block out ledge at the back. One side done. Maybe this corner, just for style, I'll give it a little 45, so it's rounded there. I'll go and do the other side now. Just above the height, just above the inferior part of the bar, underneath, just above there. So if you can see, there's my bar. I'm not on the screen. If there's my bar, just slightly above. Now, many laboratories will have different procedures. And this is just one, I think, for beginners that will work without getting too elaborate. If anything, it may even be, if I could say, superior. That's kind of really arrogant, but I'll be more humble and say I think it's satisfactory compared to industry standard. Only because I'm checking out what's going on in the industry, and sometimes it's not exactly like this. Just past the crest of the ridge, straight back. This is a guesstimation because I'm anticipating what's going to happen. 5, 6, 7. So I don't want to have metal in the way of the necks of the teeth and compromise the length of my prosthetic teeth. So everyone get the two mesh patterns on, symmetrical, just above the bar, maybe above the superior part of the bar, the inferior part of the bar, the bottom of the bar. And then let's stop there. Once those two sections are on, we have 22 gauge wax, whether it's light blue or green. It's a rope wax. It's very thin. It's very sensitive. But I want you to run that connected to the inferior part of the bar, underneath the mesh retention, and up to the middle, as I've done. We'll do the other side. Underneath the red, even with below of the bar, straight back, joining it to the red pieces, or the mesh retention. And you can use your fingernail, spatula, but so from underneath an extension from the lingual bar, and then connecting underneath the red lattice retention on both sides. Now here's where the free wax comes in. I'm going to heat up my spatula. Everyone's will be slightly different from here on in, depending how you cut the circles. But I'm going to seal up to the guide plane, the red wax. I'm going to fill in the corner circle here by the lingual bar. And then I'm going to fill in either a half circle or all the circles, depending how many are exposed, and seal it together with the 20 gauge wax along the bottom. Now this is going to take some practice. The worst thing you do is start over again, because I don't want you to melt the patterns and destroy them. Remember, everything you have in wax, you will have in a chromium cobalt alloy. And from non-precious alloy, we know trimming a crown is very painstaking. The heat generated, you can only imagine that of a... So it's going to take some practice to deal with the wax. And I think that's pretty much the experience we're looking for. I'm going to fill in, again, the corner circle. Now flush. Don't build it up higher. I'm building it up flush. I've put something here at the back, right on the crest of the ridge, hanging off the back of my block out. There's a sharp line back there. And I'm going to create a tissue stop. If I blocked out further, I could have cut a hole in my block out and made the tissue stop. The tissue stop touches the tissue. The mesh retention does not touch the tissue. There's acrylic above and below the mesh retention enveloping it, creating the mechanical retention for my freehand saddle. So once we've sealed that, we can stop and have that checked. Nice and neat, symmetrical. Some of it will be slightly different depending how many holes you would cut from your mesh retention. I didn't measure, it just happened to be as it is. I'm going to take my alcohol torch. Very careful with the alcohol torch as not to melt the pattern. Just kind of gently, very gently. And if you're better with the spatula, you don't even need the alcohol torch. But I'm just smoothing out just ever so slightly my wax up, blending it in. In my generation, I'm not that old, but we had to do a lot of this by hand. The lingual bars were plastic patterns and they didn't stick, and we'd seal them down. Now, if you notice, I sprayed the base of the model. So when I rub, there's no dust coming off on my hands. If we get a lot of chalky stuff on our hand, we didn't spray our model, and that's going to go into our wax up. The next step is the clasps. And we have a whole host of them in our box kit there. The small one would be for bicuspids and the large one for molars. But exclusively, you could use the large one. That's not exclusive. You could use the large one for a bicuspid as well. So I'm going to put the end of it right on the ledge, on top of the ledge. And there you have the G clasp. Don't squeeze it, don't push it, don't pinch it. Then on the lingual side, you can use a large one or small one. Along the ledge, joining it at the guide plane just below the marginal ridge. Freehand the rest, the occlusal rest. Fill with hot inlay wax the occlusal rest, not inlay wax, the pattern wax. So there's no voids. I just sealed it a bit there. The guide plane, I'm freehanding, which is really the thickness of the two clasps together. And I'm just filling in underneath them, joining those clasps together. And then now you have my guide plane. Move to the other side. And if you want to do the lingual side first, I'll do that if it makes it any different. You experiment. They're only patterns. Above the height of contour I've measured where I created my ledge. On the ledge. Careful not to pinch, nick, squeeze the rest, the clasp pattern. Fill in the guide plane and seal the two arms together. The guide plane will be the thickness of the, oh my goodness, what a mess. Well, this could happen. Perfect. I'll scrape this off. We don't want to cast that. Oh my goodness. I got a little excited, I guess. Be careful, don't scratch the model. Just take the wax off. It won't be an issue. Maintain the integrity of the clasps at all time. Watch your other hand. If your other hand is holding and the other one's working, don't squeeze the wax pattern. Okay, where was I? I was waxing the thickness or the width of the guide planes. Just need a little bit more. And that guide plane is about as thick as those clasps, arms. You'll seal the two together right up to the marginal ridge. In a critical area here in the, let's say, the armpit of the reciprocal arm. Straight down. And it looks like I forgot my occlusal rest on 3-4. I'll build that up here. Free-flowing hot wax into the rests. Make sure it goes all the way to the margins of the rest preparation, so there's no, just like a margin of a crown, we don't want it short. After the wax is hard, you can take your Zale carver and shape and refine your wax up. So these rests are like spoon shapes or concave, so I'm taking a little concavity there. A little bit thick there, so I'll take some down. These tissue stops are square or rectangular, so I'll square them off. And this one here was a little overzealous with my previous wax, and then I added a little too much here at the shoulder of the rest, but I can take it off. Blend that in. And then contour concavity. Now, if you leave it full, you're going to concave it in your trimming. So we've got the arms on, we've got the guide planes, we've got the mesh retention, we've got the lingual bar. As I stated earlier, this could be a little bit different design if this was in the commercial marketplace. I mean, this class 1 free end here is missing some indirect retention, but this is just a procedural first time beginner wax up, so I want to make it simple for success. We go back to our 20 gauge wax. Whether we have a blue one or we have a green one in our kit, the green one might be like a 20, but regardless, they're the same. I'll use the green one. I'm going to go straight down from the guide plane. I'm creating my external finishing line. This is going to be the most challenging part of the wax up for most of you. Before putting this on, make sure my wax up is smooth underneath. It's got a bit of an angle to it here. No straight lines. And it's going to taper off, just like my drawing, a little bit to the distal and longer than my bar. Hopefully you can see that there. Longer than my bar. This is the tricky part, if there isn't one yet. I'm going to take some free wax, and I'm going to seal just the mesial part of the finishing line, creating the external finishing line, keeping a sharp edge, maintaining the integrity of the 20 gauge wax on the distal side. This is going to be my junction between acrylic and metal. So this has to be really neat and sharp and well defined. And then it blends right into the guide plane up here. Now, something we're going to talk about further is the offset from the external to the internal, so we don't ruin the integrity or the strength of the lingual bar. So let me look from this angle here. You can see I've filled in some wax on the mesial side, a little bit here in the bar, and then tapering downwards. My acrylic now is going to probably come from here down this way, my flange. You could make it longer, but I think that's, as long as it's longer than the mesh retention here, we got to create some undercut here, as you see, is maintained, where I'm putting the Zale carver. There's an undercut here, almost like a lock for my acrylic. Now, if you go under a microscope or your magnifying glass would suffice, you can clean up your wax up. I'm doing this from behind the video on the phone, so it's difficult for me to see. But after off camera, I'll go and I'll clean it up. Once we do one side, remember, straight down past the junction of the mesh and the lingual bar on a bit of an angle, and then right up, almost blending in with the guide plane, if I show you this way. And then it tapers down this way a little bit, giving it some strength and some shape. And you can see this is going to be the junction of, this will be the junction of the acrylic, and then chromium cobalt, the external finishing line. Oh, I dropped some on there. What a mess. Very sloppy here. Behind the telly. But you know what? That's just an excuse. I have to overcome that. So it's easy for me, possibly more than you, because I'm anticipating what it's going to look like at the end. Right now, you're just following all and saying, I'm not sure what it's going to look like. I have somewhat an idea from our discussions of major connectors and what have you. I'll even thicken up the joint here so it blends in really nice to my lingual bar, to my finishing line. Maybe I'll make this one a little bit longer, since I shorted us over here. Make it symmetrical. The other one I made a little more robust. So I'll make this one just as. And then I'm going to have some trimming here. I hate to rely on my trimming, although personally I'm probably a little bit handier with the trimming than the waxing. Only from impatience, probably. Doesn't matter where you spend the time, you're going to spend the same time. But it is nicer to spend the time waxing rather than trimming. It's less burning of your fingers. It's a lot cleaner. It's a lot healthier. It's a lot more enjoyable. It's quiet. Let me shorten this side a little bit. I think I got a little bit long with my... Sorry, I went off the screen again. I tried to zoom it in, so... And then naturally we're going to attempt to do this digitally and then print it and then cast it. A lot of people get excited about the digital because maybe it replaces the analog and the analog's not that good. I don't know. But the block out definitely is a lot faster. I'm going to just gently. Did I say gently? Blend this in. Don't ruin the dimensions of the pattern. It would be a shame just for the little alcohol torch. You can go on your magnification, any kind of flash, contour. This would be like the margin of a crown. Can we have the wax ups that detailed, please? I don't see why this should be any more sloppier than your crowns. This should actually even be more neater. I find a lot of students say, oh, it's just a partial. Slap it on there. Not a good idea. This one I'm not too satisfied with here. Add just a little bit. I just want to create this reciprocal arm. I trimmed a little bit off. And the rest I made a little concave. I think that'll do. Well, if I made that one thicker, then I should learn to leave things alone, but I'm just going to thicken that up too. Really, the reciprocal arm won't have that much taper to it because it's so short. It'll probably be the same dimension distal to mesial. So there we have our external finishing lines, our lingual bar, the external finishing line finishes. It's pointing in this direction, so then the acrylic technician, which will be you, will have as much leeway to go up or down with the flange, depending if this was a border molded impression or overextension. So once we have our wax up, I'll go to sprue and invest this. There's different technologies about spruing. You should sprue to the thickest part of the pattern, but I notice as students we ruin our wax ups. So we should sprue right on the lingual bar there, but I'm going to sprue just in front of the finishing line, underneath the pattern. And if you could think of maybe the on-ramp to a highway if you drive, there's no right turns. The metal's going to go down and around. Now we're using induction, so it's not as critical with the flow like it would be with a centrifuge casting. And then I don't want to ruin my wax up, so I'm going to sprue this underneath the mesh pattern. Underneath. And it's still the thickest portion there where it's fused. This will be frustrating for you, but we'll have all day to finish this and the next one. Remember, work the sprue in your hand a little bit. Give it no right hand, no right turns, no direct spruing. Has to be, these uprights of the sprue have to be in the center of the model. Underneath the pattern is very clear here. You can see how far underneath. I've done that on purpose so you can see. And then a little bit harder for me, I'll fill in with some wax pattern wax underneath. Now this may create slight porosities on the inside of the lingual bar by the finishing line, but I think it will maintain the integrity of our wax ups. It'll happen on a few. But I have the student sprue on the bar and then just a colossal mess. We can do that on a future project. But this first one, I really want you to have some success. So you can see these two are right in the center of the model. There's no right angles. I'm going to fuse these together. Right? You can see they're intimately together as one. I'm going to fuse them together with a little bit of pattern wax. And then you will all each receive a sprue former as such. Now, in my generation, I had to make the sprues, which I can give you a demonstration on that later. So there's a hole here. I think I'd plug the hole with a little bit of my wax. Let me zoom out here. Again, keep neat. Little bits of wax everywhere. Don't want it to stick to your hands. Don't drop the model. So I just plug the hole of this sprue former. And then I'll bring this wax up, but I'll take the sprues off so you can see the wax up if you wanted to take a picture or the video anyways. Now, these two sprues are joined together. They're roughly in the center of the model. I'm going to take my surgical knife, hold the model sideways, surgerize the sprues just above the patterns, and then attach the sprue former. So the bottom of the sprue former is just above the occlusion. Can't be below the occlusion and can't be way up here. Can't be way up here. I'm anticipating what's going to happen, like denture teeth in the flask. I'm anticipating the investment ring, how high it is. I'm anticipating 400 grams of that investment powder, how much that is. Well, I'm telling you how much it is right here, just above the occlusion. If it's too long, even if you had a huge ring, it won't fit in the machine and your metal will get cool before it travels down those sprue channels. Now I'm dealing with the sprue wax, which is a little softer, so be careful. There we have it. Once it's sprued, then we're going to stop this along the way. You'll get your investment ring. We'll do the rough surface up. How's that? In the center of the investment ring. Seal the model to the base with base plate wax. Seal the model to the base. There's a lot of steps. You're going to forget some. Stop. Ask. Don't ask your neighbor if they're not sure. Have a look at their face when they're telling you the answer. Do they look sure? Are they convincing? If not, ask one of us here in the classroom. We should be able to direct you in the right direction. It's not a big deal. Say, hey, what's next? There's so many steps that most people say, I don't want to do that. There's too much to remember. Too much work. But really, it's not. It just becomes monotonous after, over and over. Remember, seal the model to the base. Make sure there's no air going under the base that can lift the base in the under vibration. Vaseline the ring. And as you can see, my sprue former is pretty close to center of the ring. And you'll see why later. That's kind of important. And then now you have to seal with wax. There's a slight seam. And we must seal this seam with some base plate wax. So you have wax in your wax pots from the dentures. And with free-flowing hot base plate wax, seal the seam. This is so no investment falls out the bottom of the ring. I've got it upside down. As I sealed the model, it's not going to fall out. Be really careful here. You have to be careful about everything along the way. Seal the base, the seam of the base to the ring, so that'll stop any investment from flowing through. The investment's very fine. It'll find its way. So the model is sealed to the base. And this is sealed to the model sealed to the base, and the ring is sealed to the base, and there's no air anywhere, and it's roughly in the center, very close to center. And this sprue is just above the occlusion or the wax pattern, those meso-occlusal rests. Now, your next step is to 80 mils of liquid, which is a 70%, 30% mixture of Bagasol K and water, one 400-gram bag per person, one bag fills one ring. 80 mils, Bagasol K and water pre-mixed, 80 mils and one bag, which is 400 grams. Vacuum mix 45 seconds, 10 seconds air only. Vibrate in here. Let it sit on the vibrator an extra 5-10 seconds after, and then let it go into the pressure pot to set, at least for the initial 15 minutes. And then a complete 45-minute set, and then we'll introduce it to the oven at a high temperature and heat soak for 15 minutes, and then cast. Okay, that's a lot of procedures, but we stop along the way, and thank you.